Good morning, everyone. Wow, that's loud this morning. That's good. Wake everybody up this Saturday morning. Happy to see so many people here at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning when you could be picking your outfits for the swearing-in this evening. Okay, that wasn't a very funny joke. I think a good way to start every morning, just to make sure we're all alert and awake and know what's going on, is to give yourselves a huge round of applause for being here. And I'm particularly excited about this morning's event because of who we have on stage. So I'm going to get out of the way as quickly as possible. But first, let me just say it is a huge delight and privilege and honor for us to have Erna Brodber back at the Bocas Lit Fest. If I'm remembering correctly, I think this is Erna's third time with us and has been wonderful each time she's come. And this year is particularly wonderful because she is the chief judge for the 2025 OCM Bocas Prize, who's going to make a big announcement for us at the prize ceremony this evening. Also happy to have back, only his second time, Jason Allen-Paisant. And because we decided we needed to bring a little bit of Jamaica to the festival this morning, our host this morning is also Jamaican, Kelly Baker-Josephs. Among many other things, a professor at the University of Miami. So I'm going to hand over now, and this is going to be a wonderful, scintillating session. And Kelly, anything else you need me to say? No, that's it. I've done my job. Everyone, thanks very much, and enjoy the session.
What is home, my love? Home is what I remember. The church at Coffee Grove, the epicenter of the night, the call of song already of a not very intimidating church, the village's proudest work of masonry, swollen with fervent prayers, with constancy, with the sounds that rock it each night constantly. The night meeting ended. The return home was another act of solemnity.
Thank you, Jason. I asked Jason to open with those lines from his first published poem, as far as I know, yes, in Essex Salon 10 years ago. It seemed really fitting for the theme of the festival this year, and also because I was the editor for that poem and published it, and so it's lovely to feel this, to have this moment with both Jason and Erna Brodber. I'm going to introduce them, then they're going to read, then we're going to have a conversation, and then you guys will also join the conversation. So intros are short. Dr. Erna Brodber, activist, scholar, and writer, is a 2017 winner of the Wyndham Campbell Prize. She has also won a Prince Claus Award in 2006, Jamaica's Musgrave Medal in 1999, and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 1989. Her body of work includes over 24 articles, 6 single-authored historical texts, or over that, and 5 novels and 1 collection of short stories. And then next to her is Jason Allen-Paisant. His debut poetry collection, Thinking with Trees, won the 2022 OCM Bocas Lit Fest Prize for Poetry, and was a 2021 Irish Times Poetry Book of the Year. His second collection, Self-Portrait as Othello, was published in 2023, and his most recent book, creative nonfiction published this year, is The Possibility of Tenderness. He was born in Jamaica and is currently a professor at the University of Manchester. So we're going to ask Dr. Brodber to read first. You ready?
Talk to you sideways because I can't handle those lights there. I'm reading from Maya, and I'm hoping to make it 8 minutes. Netti was shocked. In all her born days, she had never felt such bitter vibrations coming from Mars Cyrus. Poor little thing. Inside her furry coat, the thin strip of flesh that was her body trembled so violently that her feet, many though they were, could not hold the ground, but skated her across and under the dry trash and into the hollow of the root of the mango tree in search of friends and family. But although they came over her and stayed close to her, their carpeted bodies over her and over those close to her in sympathy, they did not cease, the shaking did not cease, but became a mighty hissing electric storm. She infected each little body with her tremors, and each tremor transmitted the infection to the other. Shook, shimmy, and shake in the whole community of Stone Brews. Shook, shimmy, and shake, that its branches reared their heads and kicked their feet like so many wild jennies with no stockings to their can-can. Can I go over here? I can't do the things in my hand. Is there I can use that? Yes. Okay, that's okay. The electric sap had tautened their bodies into tin, and now in the mad orgasm of which they were a part, they shook their bells like Santa's sleigh. Whole lot of shaking going on, and the noise. It was the noise that agitated those trees and shrubs that Ma Cyrus kept closest to his person, the bastard cedar, the physic nut, and shy shaming lady, Mimosa pudica to you. On their shoulders, he always placed the sin-generated afflictions of the human world. They felt it. The blasted cedar's eyes were quick to tears. One little hurt, and its sap would flow right through the bark onto the side of the tree, producing enough gum to fill a jam bottle and to seal a world of envelopes. And oftentimes, Ma Cyrus and these same tears turned to gum to glue together a broken heart or a broken relationship until the organism could manage on its own again. This tree was by nature in a state of perpetual tension, which is how come the slightest bruise by thought, word, or deed sent its substance inside out. One wee electric mango grazed it, and its high-strung self went gummy. The physic not close by it began to bleed, and no wonder, with all the hanging and the ringing and the splitting and the weeping, it thought it was another Good Friday many, many years ago when the Savior of the world was lynched. Every year it relived that occasion, and its blood pressure would rise, jab it, and its life blood would come rushing out. Today the noise made it particularly hypertensive, and without help it hemorrhaged. All this uncontrolled behavior left shamey lady embarrassed, so much so that her verdant train collapsed into a set of rigid lines like the railway tracks on a map, only this time green. Ma Cyrus, sitting staring at the prostrate body of the patient, face in the cup of his palms, elbows on the weeping bastard cedar tree, listened to the cries and the hurts in the grove, and he thought, this pain, confusion, and destruction is what these new people bring to themselves and to this world. The thought hurt him in his very soul, from the sole of his feet up to the tip of his head, and it threw him upright and erect like a jack-in-the-box. Like Gonzalez with his portrait of Marley, it yanked his head back, stiffened his right hand in front of him, pointed its index finger, and glazed his eyes. Percy the chick uttered, "Lightning!" And his spittle, a missile in a silver horn, struck the line of coconut trees separating his grove from the Jones property. Slowly normalcy returned to the grove. Shamey lady spread her wings like a peacock again. The crying and the bleeding stopped. The mango tree resumed its old man's posture of quiet meditation. And if anyone had asked the little Stone Brews what all that had been about, she would say, what was all what about? For curled up now, like a satisfied cat at the base of the mango tree, she had forgotten and forgiven all. The time was 1919. The lightning storm moved from Ma Cyrus Grove to ancient districts of Manchaniel, Kensington, and Hector's River, and destroyed 14588 coconut trees, 2370 breadfruit trees, 901 residences totally, 203 residences partially, 628 outbuildings, and left 68 standing but damaged. It killed 1322 fowls, 115 pigs, 116 goats, 5 donkeys and cows, and 1 mule. Several human beings lost their lives from the drowning in the thunderstorm and sullen rivers that it brought. So reported the Reverend Musgrave Simpson to his headquarters in Britain. All this sudden destruction because Ella O'Grady Langley, lying still like a Grecian sacrifice upon a pyre, had gone too far, had tripped out in foreign. And they ain't seen nothing yet, Miss Sarah smiled wryly. What a bam when that grey mass of muck comes out of this little Miss Ella, lying down here so stiff and straight, this little cat choked on foreign, this alabaster baby shipped on a banana boat and here to short circuit the whole of creation. But not in the grove this time. A man has a right to protect his world. See how she shake up the whole place already? And he shook his head, for the trees and the buildings which a freak storm which he had driven from his grove destroyed mostly belonged to his tribe of people. So did the lives. What nigger had for to do? He sighed as many before him had done. It was August 1919. Ella Grady Langley was not fully 20. Here we are. 8 minutes and less.
To get to the archives, I drive half an hour into the center of the historical quarter of Spanish Town, the old capital of Jamaica, where when the Spaniards colonized the island. The archives are in one of the centuries-old red brick buildings where Miss Williams, the reading room supervisor, welcomes me. I fill out forms, making very tentative requests that I hope may reveal something interesting about Coffee Grove, how Coffee Grove came into existence. Miss Williams suggests that I look into the catalogs of crop returns and conveyances and disappears behind metallic silver doors, re-emerging with a few large and heavy leather-bound catalogs. Some of these are more than 2 centuries old. It's in the crop returns that I make a major discovery, perhaps the biggest discovery from this trip in Kingston. A return from 1832, the year preceding the passing of the Abolition of Slavery Act, reveals that in February of that year, there were 116 enslaved people registered on the Coffee Grove estate. Up to this time, the plantation was managed by an attorney, Duncan Robertson, on behalf of the heirs of one David Hutchinson of Ayr in Scotland. David Hutchison, I discover with Miss Williams's help, died in 1820 in Black River, St. Elizabeth, which is very near to Parity, the district where Mama was originally from. But the first time we actually see David Hutchison in the archive is the year 1797, when 300 acres of land were granted to him by George III of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, and of Jamaica, Lord Defender of the Faith, via letters patent from Alexander Lindsay, 6th Earl of Balcarres, the Lieutenant Governor of the island of Jamaica. In the letters patent, we are told that David, quote, hath transferred himself with his servants and slaves into our beloved island in pursuance of a proclamation made in the year of his late Majesty King Charles II, to become one of our planters there, and for divers other causes and considerations, end quote. As the first available crop records show, the lands in question had been designated as Coffee Grove. According to the letters patent, these lands were situated in the parish of Vere. While Coffee Grove is now located in Manchester, it's worth noting that Manchester was formed from portions of Vere and 2 neighboring parishes, Clarendon and St. Elizabeth, in 1814. This is the origin of my district. I have found it here in officialdom, in a 200-and-something-year-old leather-bound volume of deeds in the Jamaica archives. I've read in the work of historian David Austin that by the 1760s, roughly a third of the white population of Jamaica were Scots. Even today, many of the most common surnames in Jamaica are Scottish clan names: Gordon, Davis, Douglas, Forbes, Graham, Murray. Our captive forebears had the names of their white masters imposed on them, another act of erasure. Many of these enslavers were highland peoples who were themselves victims of English colonization in their own lands. Yet, by getting involved in this English sugar island, as it was then called, in the Caribbean, they were now making huge fortunes of the forced labor of captive Africans. It's already noon, and I've been here since the place opened at 9 a.m. I know I'm hungry, but I can't spare a moment to stop and eat. I'm tripping on excitement. I need to go back to Coffee Grove this evening, and time in the archives moves too quickly. Where do I go from here, and how do I find out more about David Hutchison? Miss Williams informs me that the Island Record Office is only a 10-minute drive away at a place called Twickenham Park, where they stow deeds, conveyances, wills. There, she says, I might be able to find out more about David and what he did with his lands. I bob and weave through the mad afternoon traffic, jumping a few queues and also pushing my way through when other drivers decide to do the same. Real Jamaican style. When I make it to the Island Record Office, breathing heavily, they mercifully accommodate the researcher who's come all the way from England. Mr. Reynolds, the archivist, allows me to skim through mountains of deeds and wills. I start by searching catalogs from the 20th century using the names of people I know. But I soon realized that I'll make little progress this way. The peasants didn't register their properties. In fact, like Mummy, like Mama, many of them still don't. All they have is common law titles. While I'm pondering, Mr. Williams appears at my desk. Why don't you look among the wills that we have here, he suggests. If you can find David's will, you should be able to see who inherited his property and what they did with it. Sound reasoning. If I can find the identities of David's successors, I might be able to establish a chain of land ownership. I search the will catalogs until closing time. Desperate and frustrated, I accept the fact that I'll have to pay for another night at the hotel in Kingston and return to the Island Record Office tomorrow. Thankfully, the next day does bring joy, precisely the kind of joy I was hoping for. With Mr. Reynolds' help, I eventually locate the listing of David's last will and testament in a catalog. Soon, Mr. Williams emerges from the holy vaults bearing a dusty and enormous leather tome filled with endless calligraphic cursive that I have to train myself to decipher. Slowly, I start to make sense of David's will. It opens with the following words: I, David Hutchison of the parish of Manchester, planter, bequeath all my plantation in Manchester called Coffee Grove, together with slaves and stock, to my beloved brother George Hutchison of the city of Edinburgh, in Great Britain, and to Alex Moore, Esquire of St. Elizabeth, in trust for the purposes hereinafter recited. George, the above-mentioned brother, is one of David's inheritors, £1,000, a significant sum of money at the time, and so are David's beloved sister, Agnes Jean Hutchison of London, Agnes's son, George Ferguson Hutchison, and one Miss Jean Hutchison of Ayr, daughter of the late Provost James Hutchison, presumably a close relation. David had no legitimate children. Instead, his will lists 5 reputed children by Elizabeth Hunt, a free woman of color. Incidentally, all 5 children, aged 3 to 14, were baptized in Elgin, Scotland, in 1820, the year of their father's death. In the will, they each received, quote, £100 at the time of David's death, then £200, then £1,000 each when they attained 21 years. David made good provision for these natural children of his. In addition to the financial bequests, his will stipulates that, quote, a comfortable dwelling house is to be erected and furnished on Coffee Grove for Miss Hunt and her children, and they are to have the services of 8 slaves. A further twist is that archival records list David's daughter Jean, this child of a free woman of color, as an unsuccessful claimant for slave compensation for Coffee Grove Estate in Manchester, Jamaica, as one of the, quote, residuary legatees of her father, David Hutchison, end quote. The slave compensation in question was the one given by the British government to the owners of slaves by an Act of Parliament, the Slave Compensation Act of 1837, for the loss of their property upon emancipation. The package was £2 million at the time, which several estimates put at around £87 billion in today's money. It was so large that British taxpayers, in other words, many of the readers of this book, were still paying for it until 2015.
Thank you both. Jason was reading from The Possibility of Tenderness, his recently published creative nonfiction book, and Dr. Brodber was reading from Mayal. And they both, we're going to talk today a little bit about genealogy, archives, and the natural world. May not flow exactly, but that's where we're going. And so I'm going to start with genealogy, which you may have heard, well, you definitely heard in Jason's reading, that tracing of Coffee Grove and where it comes from in the archives, et cetera. And also, Dr. Brodber, you also deal with that. But there's an personal genealogy here. In that same chapter, right before what Jason reads, Dr. Brodber is herself leading him, or I don't know if leading is the right word, but accompanying you to the archives. So there's a story here personally, so I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you met, your relationship, how you came to be. Yeah, I know, it's an interesting question or a weird question, but it is part of the archive that we don't have, right? So how did you guys come to be going to the archives together?
Oh, yes, I'm talking about how I met Jason, which is right, for me, is quite funny. There was a knock on my door, and I went out to find who was knocking, and it turned out to be Jason, whom I'd never seen before. And Jason had come to be with the people of Woodside on Emancipation Day, because it was known that we usually have a celebration which is worth being at on Emancipation Day. As it turns out, there was no celebration on Emancipation Day that year. But Jason came across and sat with us, those of us who had been left over, because I also do have something called black space reasoning before emancipation. So some people were left over from the black space reasoning, and we sat very nicely on the floor because there was nowhere else to sit. And we talked and talked and talked until Jason was ready to leave. And that is how I met Jason. I met Jason and his, I keep calling the wrong name for Coffee Grove.
Coffee Grove, yes.
It's Coffee Grove.
Yeah.
I met Jason and Coffee Grove. And then I was working, well, I had done work on the history of Woodside. So Jason was interested in how I did what I did and what happened to what I did. So we developed that kind of relationship of working together to see where we could take what we had together. And that is how it happened. And at the time, I was also doing a study of my own family, which involved all those dirty books that Jason talks about. As a matter of fact, I believe my right hand is now suffering from all those dirty books that I had to lift and go through, looking for Brodber or anything related to Brodber. And not only that, I don't know if this bothers Jason, but it bothered me because it's $2,000 per hour to do that. And having paid the taxi man to take me from my home to Spanish Town for $9,000 and sometimes $10,000, to spend $8,000 looking in those dirty books has left me with a right hand that is not going to be able to do many things from now, because I believe those things made me sick. So Jason also knew that I had worked in the archives. I'd spent a lot of time in the archives, and I had more time to look at some things in the National Library. So when Jason said he was going to the National Library, I said, "Can I come with you?" And Jason, with his nice car, It wasn't mine. I go to these things, taxi from Woodside to Highgate, from Highgate to Anota Bay, taxi, from Anota Bay to Kingston, bus. That is how I get to do what I have to do. But this was a swanky, beautiful, it was a red car, right?
It was a rental car.
Yes, it was a red car. Yes, yeah. Okay. So I drove in the front of Jason's red car down to East Street and went in to the National Library, while Jason stayed there and waited for there were some important people that you had to meet. I'm going to tell you this, you're not going to laugh, but I laugh all the time. Jason, I know, respects my work. So when the higher people came to interview Jason, Jason kept saying, "There's Dr. Brodber." Not a soul was noticing Dr. Brodber. And that was my big joke, because Jason did not know that Dr. Brodber don't have no pedigree. All right. So I just kept saying, anyhow, that is how Jason and I met, and we have continued to communicate with each other. That is how it has been, hasn't it, Jason?
Well, yeah. I mean, the day I remember the day I came there. You don't remember, but I brought Hopeton with me. You remember that? Yeah.
I remember you brought somebody.
So I just said, it had been years that I wanted to come and meet you. And, I know about Woodside. I know about the procession, the performance that you do there every year. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you're still doing it, but I said, I need to go. And then I didn't have anybody to introduce me. And I was staying by Hopeton in Three Hills, which is nearer the coast in St. Mary. We're still in St. Mary when we come to you, but it feels like a different... Because it's like hour and something.
It's the border of St. Mary and St. Catherine.
Yeah, but the roads are very small and winding, tortuous. So, it feels like a long trek, which it is, like an hour's drive to get there. And I said, Hopeton, I go in, and he said, what is this lady? I tell him about you, and him say, yeah man, may I forward? So we jump in the car and we get there. And it was a moment, because I was struck by how you just came and said, just come in, just come and take a seat. And
on the floor.
Yeah, and we just fell in. But to fast forward to when I was doing the research on this book, I started reaching out to you from before we went to the archives, because knowing of your work, which has utilized the archives from forever, really. I had Woodside Peartree Grove in my hand, and in actual fact, you started to give me pointers and enlighten me, kind of train me in a sense about how to look, even before we went. Because you started to ask certain questions, and you were like, these are some of the questions. If you want to find what you're looking for, these are some of the questions that you need to be asking. So, I mean, to come like that more directly to the question about genealogy, yes, there's a genealogy happening here, because I'm researching the genealogy of my family. That's about bloodlines and how bloodlines have been, obscured through the absences in the archives. But it's also an intellectual genealogy, right? It's a kind of, Erna, Nana Erna is an intellectual ancestor. And so to be happy, and I was still processing, like, may I pick up Erna in a car go Kingston, and we are we having coffee, we having lunch, we sitting together in the rooms, we're doing this work, and it was kind of like surreal, because of the what's the word to use? I mean, I've been studying Erna Brodber's work from I was in university. I was first introduced to your work via mail through Michael Buckner, who I think was supposed to be here, but he didn't make it. Michael Buckner taught us a graduate course at UWI. Speaking of genealogy as well, right? Michael Buckner taught a post-colonial literature graduate course at UWI, and Ronald Cummings was in that course as well, and Mile was on the curriculum. It was on the list of books. So I've been living with your work and studying it for decades, and here we are now going to do research together, right? And so the intellectual, being in the room with Erna is significant, but also I think what's happening is that I'm getting to practice a different kind of archiving, a kind of counter-archiving, where figures like somebody like Erna Brodber is teaching you how to search between the silences, right? Because that's what Erna's work teaches us. How to, the gaps are there, the violence of the erasures and of those absences. But your work exemplifies how to look, to search between the silences, to where invention and imagination can do some different kinds of work. So I think it's significant in those two ways. For me, it was, yeah.
I want to say something else about this young man here, which I have not said to him before. People who come to my house after the 30 miles of bad road normally call and say, "What would you like me to bring?" And they very often bring a slice of pizza, some ice cream, which are things that will not be found in my house normally. This young man drives up, always in a beautiful red car. And in that red car is a hand of banana, a piece of yam, probably a couple grapefruits. I have never asked him, did you grow this yam? Which I would like to answer no. Did you dig this yam? How many hands of banana was on the tree? I'm asking no. He always brings food.
Yeah. I stand by while it's being digged. I help. I kind of help with the digging. But that's what I bring, because that's where I'm from. You know about where I'm from and our gifts.
Right. Yeah. And that is what I want, because I am into natural food. I'm not supposed to be eating the ice cream that people bring, and really the pizza is usually cold when it reaches. But the yam, and we can get together on the yam, because one of the first things I patted myself on the back about when I started living in the country was the fact that I dug a yam. And after that, there was something I had to write, for which I was very happy that I had gone through the business of digging the yam. It's no easy business to dig the yam. You have to make sure that you don't bruise the yam. Right. And the yam goes down and down and down and down. And you have to be using your stick or your cutlass, going down and going and down, not to touch the yam, not to bruise the yam. And then the yam has feet. So you have to make sure that you don't go too much far right or too much far left, because you might bruise the feet of the yam. And I guess this is why I wanted to know whether he knows about digging yam, because that requires super intelligence. I know he's intelligent, but is he intelligent in the way that he can bring piece of yam for me?
Yeah.
Does he have that kind of intelligence?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I moved away from the yam digging because, as you will read in the book, I come from a family where everybody dig yam. So I had to do some of that when I was a boy. But, life has taken me on other roads, paths. But, I mean, the yam digging is I'm still on the land and thinking about the yam digging. And, touche in terms of the intelligence that is required from people who plant the yam, who have to know what day to plant it, when to reap it, and all the stuff that you're talking about. That kind of technical intelligence, right, is what a lot of this work is all about, right? Talking about these people who live with the the land in this way. Yeah. By the way, I see the Rainmaker's Mistake, and I keep thinking about this book because I read this book a number of years ago, and it just did. I didn't fully understand what was going on in it, but it was something potent that it was felt, and Yam is you talk a lot about Yam in it and the people of the Yam, and I guess the epistemologies and the worldview was something I felt like you were giving to us. You were giving to us, inviting us to step into a different way of living with the earth and like kind of a different epistemology.
See, I had a question about archives, and I have a question about Yam. And I wasn't sure. I don't know where to go now. I'm going to go with archives, and we'll see if we get back to Yam. You've sort of started this, Jason, the question of the gaps in the archive. And so my question to both of you are, how do you approach those gaps in both your creative and or your academic works? So just a quote from both of you, Jason, from Possibility of Tenderness, you say, how do we tell the stories that are here and not there, that are there and not there at the same time, as you're thinking through those silences, but also the things that people either don't know, the people you know don't know or don't tell you. How do you tell the stories that are there and not there at the same time? And then Erna, in Woodside Pear Tree Grove, PO, post office, you're writing about a detail that you find about two people who attended a wedding. And you're wondering how they came to be at that wedding, and you have a couple questions, and then you say, history will have to keep this as a secret. That you end there, you decide, make it up as the reader will also decide based on your questions. So I'm wondering, as you approach these gaps, that you have the questions, you wonder the things you find, the things you don't find, what do you do with that in your creative and or academic work?
You want to go first? I think sometimes first of all, there's a lot that you find, because as you saw in that segment that I read, there was a lot that I've actually found. I mean, I found one element that helped me to just make sense of a lot in terms of this place where I grew up. Is not just called Coffee Grove for no reason. It is a former coffee estate, like Woodside was, and you find details about this place. You find stories about this place, and it allowed me to reinscribe, the blurb of the event talks about reinscribing the local and the seemingly insignificant into global history, right? Because when you see that, okay, this is the estate, this is who owned it, these are the characters, this is where they're from, right? You end up even actually walking some of these grounds as a person living in the UK now, right? In terms of London, in terms of Scotland, where some of these, where the patriarch, the owner of this slave plantation actually came from. So you do find things in the archive, right? But alongside that, there is a lot that you can't find. I find there's a lot that you take a long time to find. Like, you actually will find it if you look hard, but it takes, right, days and weeks, sometimes years. But what about the things that you can't eventually find? Like I'm interested in understanding my hillside district, to understand, okay, this is the picture of how we move from enslavement to emancipation to the lay of the land today and who owns the land, and as I call them, the peasant plantations, people who they're peasants, but they sometimes own a lot of land, right? And they're very proud about it. I want to understand that genealogy, okay? But as I say in the book, because these peasants didn't have actual titles, it's hard to trace that. And there's other things that I'm looking for as well alongside that, that's hard to find in the archives. I think what I find is, what I come to is this lyric speculation, where I find that the gaps are not just a wall in your face, they're an invitation as well to imagine, to invent, to do what I do as a poet, which is that thing whereby words can create presences, words can transform the story. You can imagine what was there. You can imagine the missing story. But you can also, I think, dig into use the stories that are all around you already to I would say, create us. I don't know what you do with the with the poetry. That poetry that I do, I end up. This is a prose book, but you see, I end up doing these interludes, which I think when I say the lyric speculation, I think that's where a lot of it comes in. And I say the first thing in that I think is happening is that you're showing the absence, showing a thing to be seen missing. It's not just saying a thing is missing, but you're showing it to, you're showing it to be seen missing, and in showing it to be seen missing, I think you're already doing a work. You're already, who knows what work entails, but I think you're laying a trail for yourself, for other people that you can come back to. I'm not writing a novel here. I was very conscious about that. It was very important for it to be non-fiction, even though I'm using a lot of the tools of fiction. But what I'm saying is that I think there's a lot that is actually poetry, and there's a lot that actually leaves a trail that others can build on.
Okay, talk about the missing things. They don't worry me. It doesn't worry me any longer. Perhaps because I just have faith in God, and I'll probably work my way to that. Because somebody will come along and do it, I'm quite sure. Somebody else could. Just as I got up to do it, somebody else will come and see those spaces and say, I want to fill these gaps. I know it's going to happen. And which is why, if I had some money to leave to anybody, I would leave some money to the libraries, and I would leave some money to the archives. Because there is where the person who comes behind me is going to find the stuff that I did not find. Okay. And then, of course, talk about the genealogy. There's a genealogy in terms of other people's work. I would not have started writing Woodside Poetry Grove if there was not a colleague of mine, or an ex-colleague of mine, called Swithin Wilmot. Swithin is one of the earlier historians of the University of the West Indies that I know of, who did work on ordinary people. No prime minister, no minister of this and that. Swithin's work is on the ordinary people and how they reacted to the emancipation period. So we're going very far back, and you probably don't want this anyhow. When I left the University of the West Indies to come and go down to my village in Woodside, the point of my moving was to raise the possibilities for the people I was around. I figured that I had been sent out to do some work, to come back to work for the people. So that is that. In the process of this, several people came down to talk to my Woodside people. One of them was Swithin Wilmot. And Swithin came down to talk about St. Mary, which is the parish that I live in the post-emancipation period. And Swithin called people's names like the Williamses who were in Woodside. And there were people there saying, my God, I know those people. Those people were my grandfather's friend. And they had never considered before that the thing called history had them in it. Okay? So this is what I call what is the word again? Of history. Swithin passed something on to me, the genealogy of history. And then, of course, if I had not done an honors history course, I perhaps would not have realized how to go about doing the work. So I also rate those people, and they are part of the genealogy that are the things that I inherited. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and not the
excuse
genealogy.
me, we have to meet again on this business of coffee. I did not, Woodside was coffee, you know. Woodside was coffee.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Right. So we have to do some work. We have to talk again about your place and the coffee, Manchester and the coffee, and St. Mary and the coffee. Okay. All right. Okay.
Sure.
Given that we have 10 minutes, or less, I'm going to skip my questions and say that, open it up to questions from the audience already. So we'll go here and then Alexis. So back here. We'll do 2 and then see how we go. And then 1 more. All right, 3. There was 1 here? Oh, okay, Anthony. Yes, so. Yes. So here first. We'll just do them all. Is that too confusing?
Hi, good morning. Firstly, wow, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I really admired you, Jason, and how you decided to take up mentorship by Dr. Brodber by just driving her to the archives. And I think that's something really beautiful about a mentor/studentship relationship. So can you share with me some of the things that you learned from Dr. Brodber and the privilege that you had of learning with her as you all did your research?
Thank you so much.
I was going to do 2 questions.
Oh, okay, you want it?
Yeah. Is it 2 different? Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, the first thing I really learned from her is, as I was saying earlier, is how to look. Like I had no training in archival research, which I think, so as somebody who had no official training in archival research, well, no training whatsoever, I mean, you can do things intuitively, but when you can sit with somebody like Erna Brodber, with all her experience and all of her knowing how to look, it's really the how to look that I gained a lot from. What questions to ask of the archive, how to look, that was a big thing. I probably picked up, I know that I picked up a lot of things from Erna Brodber that I probably couldn't name here from the top of my head, really, because I've sat with her. I've been in your house. Every time I come to Jamaica, I come to your house, and I sleep at the house and I stay there for days on end.
You just not dig any yam, nor cut any banana.
You don't have any yam to dig over there. And so I pick up a lot in around how to, the way you think is always interesting. The way you make connections is something very particular. And I absorb a lot, I think. I have absorbed a lot. Yeah, I don't know what else to add, but I think just the archival thing, and it was big. It really is big. And if you read the book, you see that it was big, and I think I wanted to honor you. I mean, she is there in the story as well. I wanted to honor you, and I wanted to honor this way of engaging with the land, engaging with the earth. I wanted to honor this approach to the archive that dignifies our people, and that kind of, as I was saying a while ago, creates this stepping ground, a beautiful stepping ground for the imagination. right? These forms of imagination.
Thank you all. I'm really grateful to be witnessing this intergenerational ceremony that you have invited us into. And I wanted to go back to the readings that you started with. I feel like, Jason, the excerpt that you chose was also an intergenerational ceremony in the archive of reaching beyond generations through that form. And Dr. Brodber, your reading had, and so much of your work, but that particular reading went to an interspecies ceremony around change. And I was wondering if maybe you could each speak to it, but especially you, Dr. Brodber, to speak to this question of ceremony and the practice, the repetition, the sacred, but also how it moves beyond the human species to all species.
I'm going back a little further than I had. When I came down to Woodside, as I told you, it was so that I could help my village. And so I read everything that I could read. This is before the archives. And there were gods there. Not only, there were gods. There were gods in the past too, and I'm not talking about the necessarily spiritual gods, but they were. And personally, for myself, I was left there when my mother went off to get her independence and go back to the schoolroom, and my father was just settling himself in as a farmer in the area. I was left more or less by myself. I have great spaces in my head of being alone in that place. But I knew I was not alone because there were the spirits of that place. The spirits of that place. And I spent a lot of time getting a monument established to the spirits of that place, the people who were enslaved there. Okay. So that is a kind of, I'm gone away from your question, I believe.
Keep going.
Oh yes. So that was my work that I had to do, which I think I have kind of done. Okay. So there were, all of them are gods. To have gone through that thing, you got to go through it, you have to be a god. Okay. So I did this to honor the gods who took care of me when I was by myself and needed help. Okay. All right. Okay.
Can I just say one line? Yeah. I mean, the idea of ceremony is important because I hear like encounters across, you sometimes what you're doing probably is encountering the dead, right? This book is framed as a journey back in search of Mama being my grandmother who nurtured me and who, transmitted a lot of that sensibility, the connections with the earth. She was a farmer, she planted yams, as a woman, as a single older woman in Jamaica, as a bad woman, as they say, and she was into her plants as well. And what I'm thinking is, the writing is a space in which we can re-encounter the dead. We can deal with unfinished business, because I think this is what I'm doing in the book. This book is a way of dealing with unfinished business. There's a kind of substrate of guilt in the work as well that readers will get. I won't go into that because time is running out. But it was a way of kind of re-encountering her through those spaces, right? Obviously, the act of writing was a way of re-encountering her and say, let's deal with some unfinished business, Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we are at time. Thank you both for such lively conversation and telling us a bit of your story together and individually. Like Amilcar said yesterday, this for me is a highlight moment to have you both here on stage. Both Erna and Jason, this is my official closing announcement. Erna and Jason will be available to sign their books at the designated book signing table outside. Please give them a couple minutes to clear through, and you can speak with them there. And of course, their books are available by the booksellers in the library atrium. Thank you guys so much. I'm sorry we didn't get so many questions.